Confident, confident, confident. I can be confident, 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 confident. I can be confident at work.
Hello and welcome to the Confident at Work podcast. I'm your host and your confidence coach, Anna Manning. And today we're talking about being proactive or being reactive at work and why it matters for your confidence. So, you know that I'm a confidence coach, and mainly I spend my time coaching professionals who want to feel more confident at work. But during the course of that, sometimes this issue of proactive versus reactive comes up. And in order to feel more confident, more calm, more in control, this is something that some of my clients need to address. So it's something that we work on. And I thought it was something that you might find useful to hear me talking about too. So you might feel like there are times when your day is literally running you instead of the other way around. You might constantly feel like you're on the back foot. You might be chasing problems or responding to everyone else's priorities. And it can leave you with a vague sense of, well, I know I did stuff today, but what did I actually do? And did any of it actually make a difference? I was busy, sure, but was I actually busy doing any of the right stuff? So that's what we're looking at today, the difference between being proactive and being reactive, and why it's really easy to sometimes just get stuck in that reactive mode. We're going to take a step back and think about whether we're in the right mode at the right time, and whether being more in a proactive mode could be good for our sense of confidence and control. So what do I even mean by being reactive or being proactive? You probably know what I mean, but reactive, I'm thinking responding to what's happening in the moment, could be more typically driven by stress or urgency or external triggers, stuff coming at me, emails, pings, messages, people, phone, etc. Or proactive, which means a sense of planning ahead, anticipating challenges, acting with intention. So, this is the thing that I am trying to move forward, and here's what I'm going to do to move that forward. So, you're determining your own priorities instead of just letting the day prioritize for you. Because if you're like most people, you're in a workplace where you could potentially be subject to interruptions a lot, whether that is from email, from pinging messengers, from your own mobile phone, from other people, from clients, from colleagues, from people who you report to. It can feel like you're being pulled in a million different directions. And if you just allow yourself to be pulled in all those directions, you could probably be busy for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for the rest of your life. But it doesn't really mean that you would necessarily have done what it was you actually wanted to do. And this is a nuanced topic, right? I'm not going to sit here and tell you you should be spending all your time in proactive mode instead of reactive. That's not really how our workplaces or maybe even your job role works. But I want to encourage you to think intentionally. What does my role require in terms of the level of reactive versus proactive? And am I meeting that right now? So let's say I'm saying probably about 20% reactive and 80% proactive. Is that the ratios that I've got right now? Or am I more like 80-20 the other way around? So why do we get stuck in this reactive mode? Well, one of the things that they think happens is that actually our brains are kind of wired for threat detection, for risk detection. And it can sometimes feel safer, especially if we're in a low confidence cycle. And if you don't know what that means, go to the link in the show notes, hit the confidence assessment and take it. But especially if we're stuck in a low confidence cycle, it can feel safer to just respond instead of choose my priorities for the day and work in line with those. When you're in a low confidence cycle, things are going to feel more like they're on fire, even if actually the particular thing that someone's asking you isn't on fire. You're also going to feel productive if you're just responding, but is it the right kind of productive? I also think that our workplace culture, and I don't know if our workplaces have done this intentionally. I assume they haven't because I don't think it's very good for productivity at all. But it feels like urgency kind of gets rewarded, or at least in our head, we think that urgency gets rewarded. So we think it looks good if we're right on the end of an email constantly, or if we are replying to our client within 5 minutes, or replying to their IM message, or whatever it is. I'm not sure that's actually true, but I think that we can get into that idea in our head and in our culture, in our workplaces. It ain't good, but that seems to be the way that it is. I also think that confidence plays a role in why we can get stuck in this reactive mode. So I said if you're in a low confidence cycle, I think this is more likely to happen. But here's why. When we don't feel as confident, very often we have a lot of doubt and rumination about starting things. And you might typically hear that called procrastination. We're not feeling that confident about the thing that it is we've got to actually do, the thing that's going to move something forward. We might just spend our time, busily replying to things. I'm doing work. This is good. When actually, the thing we could or should really be spending our time on is languishing somewhere. I spoke to a client about this recently, and she told me that she actually felt quite productive in her reactive mode. But when we looked at it further, she also said she felt exhausted, behind, and like her real priorities never actually made it to the top of the list. And I was like, well, that sounds reasonable. We may also struggle with our planning and organization. If we haven't been taught or been shown, and we haven't taken the time to develop that skill of organizing, planning, prioritizing, breaking things down, it's not always easy. And if we know we're not very good at it, we're less likely to do it, or we're less likely to do it that effectively. And therefore, those priorities, those things that we're supposed to be making progress on, even when we know it, can be held hostage to the fact that we're not that great at organizing, planning, or prioritizing, or breaking down a task. Now, this is an executive function skill. It is something that can be developed and learned. But if you haven't done that yet, it's definitely going to be easier for you to stay in reactive mode than it is to actually take the time to get into proactive mode. It requires those skills. However, I think that as well as making your day go more smoothly and making it more likely that you're going to eventually contribute to your key business outputs or whatever it is you're actually there to do, you're more likely to do that if your role requires it when you're spending more time in proactive versus reactive. Because let's face it, you could spend all day doing absolute shit in reactive mode. Maybe you're not. Some of it will be useful, but some of it might not be, or at least not as useful as the thing that it is you're actually there to do. And I think, or I've certainly seen this with my clients, once they get into more of a proactive place, they tend to feel more confident, more in control, and they tend to start trusting themselves more. So when they can do that bit of planning ahead, that bit of organizing, they're able to then also communicate to other people, no, here's what I'm doing and here's what I'm not doing. Then they can think about setting a boundary. Maybe they say yes to this, maybe they say no to that. And you're reinforcing all of the time. These could all be separate topics, by the way, but you're reinforcing all of the time that sense of agency, that sense of confidence, and that sense of control. And I think what's the opposite of a downward spiral? An upward spiral. It's a positive spiral when you're acting from your priorities and your intention rather than from pressure or from urgency or from other people. So here's some examples of reactive versus proactive. An email pings up. I can see it because I have all the little notifications on, and I just start dealing with it even though I'm in the middle of a complex cognitive task. That's reactive. Versus proactive. I don't see the email because I turned off my notifications. And I continue working on the thing that I had chosen to work on in this 2-hour time block. I see the email later, and at some appropriate point, I deal with it. Reactive, maybe saying yes to a request straight away without thinking about it and then regretting it. Proactive might be saying, I need to consider that in line with my priorities. Let me get back to you. Or it may even be saying, that isn't in line with my priorities or what we're trying to achieve in the team. Reactive. Spending ages, quote unquote, doing emails versus proactive, choosing a piece of work which you're planning to move forward, deciding on the result you want in 1 hour and getting it done. Bit different, huh? Now, I'm not saying there isn't emails to be replied to. I am not saying you can say no to everything that somebody asks you to do. I am not saying that you do not have to reply to messages or make yourself available to the people around you. Of course, all of that is true. But I really need you to check with your own brain and be honest about your level of reactivity versus proactivity. Usually, the first thing that a client will tell me is, oh no, I have to respond to emails. I have to have all my notifications on. I have to do this. I have to do that. This is how I have to work. Then when we really get into it and it's like, is there actually usually anything urgent that you have to reply to immediately? They say, not really. Somebody had called me. So it turns out you didn't need to have your email notifications on. You didn't need to reply immediately at all. The thing you actually needed to do was being neglected while you were doing that. And I'm not speaking to you from like a high handed place here. We all do this. And if we're not intentional, we could be doing this for our entire career. But I want to suggest that you can get ahead of most people fairly easily by being a bit more proactive, by being a bit more intentional. It is possible. You can do this, but you have to work out what the right level of proactive versus reactive is for you in your role. Now, if you're like, I have no idea, I wouldn't even know where to start with that question, maybe you could just ask your boss. Be like, hey, I know that my role requires responding to maybe things that are urgent or people around me or supporting my team members, but how much of my time do you think I should be spending being reactive versus being proactive, i.e., working on progressing those things that we've agreed are key for me to be doing? And I wonder what they would tell you. It would be an interesting conversation to have with your entire team. Get people to tell you, this is the percentage of time I think I need to be reactive. This is the percentage of time I think I need to be proactive. And then have them ask themselves, what percentages do I actually have now? Is it flipped in the wrong direction? Is it nowhere near? Is it like, oh, I'm nearly there, could just make a few tweaks? In my experience, most people are not great at thinking this stuff through for themselves and then acting on it. I don't think there's any shame in it. It just is one of those things, and you can learn this. So ask yourself this: what's the right balance of proactive and reactive for my role? And you might tell me, well, Anna, I'm an ambulance driver, so reactive 99% of the time. Fine. Great. Good to know. But you might tell me, oh, actually, I'm a project manager. So proactive 80% of the time, reactive 20% of the time. But know what that is for you. I also want you to ask, when you're in reactive mode all day, what happens? What's the impact on you? What's the impact on the people around you? And what is the impact, most importantly, on the things that you're actually trying to achieve? What happens? It's also worth thinking about this. Where are you already being proactive? There will be somewhere where you're already planning, organizing, getting ahead of things, marking out your time, being strategic, moving things forward. Where are you already doing that? And when you show up like that, when you approach work like that, what happens? What difference does it make? I would love you to pause and jot down a few thoughts here because this is not something that's going to just change with you thinking about it. You're going to have to be a little bit more intentional. And with our modern distracted type brains and our modern distracting technologies, this stuff is, I think, probably a lot worse than it used to be. So we need to be more intentional than we used to be. In the days before we had all of this stuff pinging and pulling for our attention constantly, yes, there were other people that took our, focus, and that's fine. But there was posts that came in once a day. There was memos that went round instead of instant messages that were on paper. If you're the younger end of this podcast episode, you're going to be like, what? Yeah, it's a slower pace. But what that meant was it was easy for people to be more proactive, I think, than reactive. And now I think it's more easy to be reactive than it is to be proactive. So if you're in a team of people, I'm going to recommend that you help them to get a hold of this. And if it's just you, I'm going to recommend that you can really get ahead of quite a few people by just getting a hold of this. And it will have an impact on your confidence when you do. All right. I had more to say than I thought about that. I hope you found that useful. If you want to come and work with me, there are a couple of ways that you can do it. The first is by joining the Confident at Work membership. That is for professional women who want to come and build their confidence. We've got community, we've got training, we've got coaching. It's a cool place to be. There is a link in the show notes where you can learn more or join us. The second is private coaching. So that's when we sit down together, one-on-one, we figure out what your challenges are, where you want to get to, and then we work together so you can get there. And I walk side by side with you, coaching you, supporting you through all of it. There is also a link in the show notes if you want to explore private coaching. We can have a call where we sit down together and we go over what your challenges are. I will tell you whether or not I can help you. All right. I will see you in next week's episode. Bye.
Confidence, confidence, confident. I can be confident. Confidence, confidence, confident. I can be confident at work.